Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for attending tonight's event, My Journey to Freedom. My name is Rachel Taylor and I'm the head of adult programming here at the Wallingford Public Library. I'd like to thank you all very much for attending this evening. And I'd like to introduce this by saying that this year on January 27th, we will observe International Holocaust Remembrance Day, marking the 80th anniversary of the liberation of the Nazi concentration camp, Auschwitz-Birkenau. This evening, we are honored to have with us Andy Sarkany, a Holocaust survivor who will speak about his experiences during World War II and his time spent living in the Budapest ghetto. He will also share with us his journey since leaving Europe and immigrating to the United States. I would like to remind everyone that this is a deeply sensitive subject, which should be approached with the utmost compassion and respect. Please be kind to yourselves and to one another. If you need to leave the room at any point, you are more than welcome to do so. We would like you to do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. After the presentation, Andy will have time to answer questions from the audience. Please remember to be considerate and keep all questions specific to his experience. Thank you so much to Andy for being with us this evening, and please join me in welcoming him to our library and to our community. Thank you.
In the back and understanding. Make sure your cell phone is turned off. Because if I see you play with your cell phone, I come and get it. See, students like to do that all the time, makes no difference if they are in a classroom or anywhere else. Anyway, a brief introduction about me. The next slide will show you just a little biography. I was born on October 31st of 1936, and many of you are probably old enough to know that I'm only 39 years young. 39 came from a wonderful sitcom back in the 60s, Jack Benny Show. And in one of the episodes, people talked about age. And then he said, I'm only 39. I said, it's a very good number. I was born in Budapest, Hungary, and I'll show you a map where Hungary is. Okay? I escaped Hungary after the Hungarian Revolution, which took place in October 23rd to October 31st in Budapest, Hungary, to liberate the country from Soviet occupation. I have been speaking for over 15 years. Majority of my talks in the public school system, usually students from 7th grade up. Sometimes I do talk in colleges, public libraries like this, churches and synagogues. The topic is never old, and I will keep talking until when I'm physically capable of going around. Okay. I say that last year actually gave 86 talks, year before about 84, and I do travel in the state of Connecticut. Every now and then I go to Massachusetts, to New York. When we had Zoom, it was very convenient. I sat in my family room with my computer and talked to California, to Louisiana, all over in the country. I have been married now over 54 years. And I tell to the students, the marriage is a hard job. This is to the same lady. We have 2 children and 5 grandchildren. And the grandchildren are in college and graduate school, and my children are professionals. The next slide will show you the map of Europe. That little thing over here around the red circle is Hungary. It's in Eastern and Central Europe. Okay. That country was about 4 times as big as it is over the histories because of the wars and other political situations cut the size down. Okay. The next slide gives you a little bit of better understanding where the country is. You have Austria in the west, and in the north, that used to be Czechoslovakia. But Slovakia was part of Hungary at one point about 100 years ago. Then you are looking at the east, a little bit of the Ukraine, but a large portion of that also was part of Hungary. And this is Romania. About this much was part of Hungary. So what they call Transylvania, it was all Hungary. I remind you that people who like horror movies, there were Bela Lugosi and these guys, they all talked about Transylvania. This is it. When you are looking at the sort of west, it used to be Yugoslavia. Was a dictator called Boris Tito who ruled that country after the Second World War, until when the Soviet Union is collapsed. The closest one to Hungary is Slovenia, Croatia, and very Serbia, someplace over here.
So,
The important thing is that the Danube, which coming from the Black Forest from Germany to Austria, comes into Hungary, take a 90-degree turn, go south, and end up in the Black Sea. Budapest used to be two cities. On the west side of the river Danube was Buda, the east side was Pest. In the mid-1800s, the two cities merged and created the capital city of Hungary. Budapest used to be referred to as the east of Paris and London, particularly in the art world. People who were able to make it in Hungary, they were able to make it anywhere. The next slide is as current as right now. It's very important not to be a bystander. People who are bystanders, they like the nasty work to leave it for other people. However, we need to be an upstander. We have an obligation to each other, to our community, and around the country to speak up. Too many bad things happening, and we have an obligation to observe and talk about it. Particularly, I tell to the students that it is important that they talk to their teachers, beside the family, and in the neighborhood if they are observing something which is not right. And here is a poem written by a German Lutheran minister. It says very clearly what a bystander stands for. First they came for the communists, and I did not object because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not object because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the labor leaders, and I did not object because I wasn't a labor leader. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not object because I wasn't a Jew. And read the last couple of lines. And they came for me, and there was no one left to object. If you don't speak up, that's what happens. So we have an obligation to each other and to the community to being an upstander and not a bystander. The next slide is a very important slide because that slide will provide a relationship between you and I. Elie who received the Nobel Peace Prize for all of his efforts in behalf of us, to trying to eliminate discrimination, hatred, and trying to create a better world. I had the privilege to meet him at a special reception when I lived in Binghamton, New York. In his book, The Night, it's only 99 pages in a paperback. You could be able to read it in a comfortably afternoon. and I highly urge you to read it. That's his life story. When he was deported by the Nazis from Romania, at that time I wasn't sure it was Romania or Hungary, but it's close enough. And was a 13-year-old boy, and how he went through, and eventually able to come to the United States. He says in his book, whoever listens to a witness, and that's me. I survived the Budapest ghetto, the Nazi occupation of the city and Hungary. Becomes a witness. That's all you. Why this is so important? Because too many people today, in the 21st century, will say that the Holocaust never happened. Never happened. It's just a hoax. My dear friends, 2 weeks ago, I was in Poland for 10 days, visiting practically every remnant of the concentration camps, death camps. And I can show you from my cell phone, and I can show you a real gas chamber and a real oven where the Jews were swallowed and burned. It is no hoax, it's reality. There are beyond the 6 million Jews, there are 6 million non-Jews who were slaughtered. So it is important that we remember, because at one point in life, you may come across with somebody who will say, it never happened. Then you can say, I did meet someone, and it's real. Okay. So the next slide, we show 6 million. Jewish people will have 2 sayings, never again and never forget. Never forget is very important. We must learn from history. And I tell to the students, you've got to learn. Not only far away, but also at your home. Okay. Winston Churchill, who was a prime minister of England during the Second World War, in one of his speeches, he said, those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And you know what? We never learn. This is happening in the 21st century. We cannot avoid it. Never again, always refer to the Holocaust. And you know what? On October 7th, a year and a half ago, it happened again. Totally unprovoked. Just because they were doomed. We cannot forget these things. The next slide only gives you a simple fact. Adolf Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany on January 30 of 1933. Hitler was already active in early 20s. He wasn't anything new. He didn't create his ideology overnight. The next slide is something significant in my view. It's called Crystal Night. Translating to English, the broken glass, the night of the broken glass. On that particular day, the German government organized pogroms. Small group of Germans were sent all over in Germany to destroy Jewish properties, breaking into stores, looting them, get the Jews out of their homes, verbally, physically abuse them, burn Jewish institutions. There is a video that you can actually sometimes able to see when the synagogue was burning down in Germany, and the firefighters were watching and clapping the total destruction. Thousands of people were on the sidewalks watching how the Jews were beaten up and abused. There are a lot of stories, and there is not enough time to tell about it. But to me, that day, November 9th of 1938, it started the Holocaust. By that time, there were concentration camps and And that camps were already created, particularly in Poland. And Jews were already shipped from as far west from France, and as far south as Bulgaria, Greece, Turkey. The next slide just shows you a street scene in Germany, how the stores were broken in and looted. But I'd like to bring to your attention a very simple symbol in the far right up. It's called a swastika. Swastika has very simple meaning, and we have to remember for it. See, Hitler not only targeted the Jews, but he targeted many other groups of people. The Slovaks, the blacks, the Jehovah's Witnesses, the handicapped, and the gypsies. He wanted to create an Aryan nation, purifying the whole world. Unfortunately, he was quite successful. But that swastika means two things. Two things. Hate and hate. Nothing else. So please, do not use that four-letter word, ever. We use it so casually. It's so easy to say, I hate that. You really need to understand that four-letter word, what it truly means. It means hate. And I will refer to it a little bit later. So I suggest to you to replace that four-letter word with two other four-letter words. Those two words have real meaning to your life. Today, tomorrow, and the rest of your life. It's love and hope. Both of them are four letters. They have real meaning. And here are some attributes to those. Trust, respect, care, honor, compromise, outreach, and stability. And I tell to the students, if you learn the meaning of those words, you will be a happy member forever. So please, when you go home in the mall, you see in a window something but you don't like, don't say, I hate it, I dislike it. So the English language is very rich. I value them to speaking it. So use the right word to express your feelings. Now let's go back to Hungary and the relationship between Hungary and Nazi fascist government of Germany. The next slide will show you that a Hungarian leader, Matt Horthy, in the late 1930s, and made a commitment to Hitler that a Hungarian nation, the people of Hungary, will follow Hitler's mission of extermination, the so-called undesirable people who doesn't deserve to live. He was deposed in the early 1944, and then the other Nazi supportive government came into power in Hungary. Now let's talk about my family and myself. The next slide shows, this is a recent picture, but that building is 300 years old. And the significance of this building, that on the bottom floor, the ground floor, is a nursery kindergarten school. And the top floor, large windows, is an acrobat ballet and a dance studio. There were plenty of spaces. And this building became an orphanage for over 150 Jewish kids from ages about 3 to 14. It turns out the physical location of the building provided a safe haven for all of us. I went to kindergarten here. So 2 weeks ago when I took my daughter and her family with my grandchildren there. I said, look, I lived in that building since 1940. My parents moved into this building in an advisement from a very good friend of my father. He said, still, I want you to move into the 7th district of Budapest. There were 24 districts in Budapest, but the 7th district was very heavily populated by Jews. It had a large Orthodox community, but about 85% of that area were Jewish. There are a couple of major synagogues and smaller ones, kosher butchers, kosher bakeries, a couple of Jewish schools where I went for a short time in 1st grade. It's significant. Now, who took care of the kids? The people who lived in, the residents of the building. All the members by late 1943, early 1944 reported. So the ladies who took care of us. The Nazi occupation, which only took place in 1944, but anti-Semitism and a hatred of Jews existed before. My mother enrolled me to 1st grade. I was held back because I was born in the end of October. And here is the school, the next slide show you. It's still a school. Here is a plaque which tells you. I went there 1st grade. So when the time came in September to go to school, my mother took me there for a couple of weeks. And afterwards, she said, Andy, you can walk to school. The distance between the two buildings, which I showed it to you, is just 1.5 blocks, not quite 2 blocks. I was a happy camper. My mother preferred me to go to school on my own. Of course, tried to run. It was in the 1940s. Cars were scarce. Buses were only for transportation in major boulevards, and cars were taxis or the privileged who had automobile access. Otherwise, you didn't have to worry about crossing the street except watching the horses. So I went to 1st grade. So I am going to school on my own. And after a few days, I really felt very sick. I didn't tell to my mother. On the way walking the 2 blocks, people yelled at, "Very Jew! The Jews should die! They don't belong in society. They bloodsuckers. They are taking away our livelihood." I didn't understand what the heck they talk about. But the physical brutality pushed me down on a pavement, spit on me, slapped me around. It was too much to take. So after a couple of weeks of that, I told my mother, I don't go to school anymore. And I explained why. Then she said, you stay home. So my 1st grade education was maybe 4 or 5 weeks. It was devastating. My father, who had a small construction company, employed maybe about a dozen people. He was taken to forced labor camp shortly after when we moved there into our building in 1940. I barely had seen my dad. My mother was trying to do the best what she could, to trying to maintain some stability for me and my father's parents who lived with us. It was just difficult. I never stopped. I always had at least 1 meal a day. But I was told I'm not allowed to leave that building at any circumstances. So how we were moving toward 1944, conditions were deteriorated very rapidly. My father completely disappeared in January of 1944. And what I have overheard from the others, he was taken to a concentration camp. But where, I didn't know. And the others were talking, which I overheard, and many of us overheard, that they take them there and kill them. Just think about it. A 7-year-old kid who is minding his own business to go to school, I couldn't, and practically told that his father will be killed. It's just very difficult to swallow. Hitler became very impatient with the Hungarian government. He felt that the Hungarians are not really doing what they made a commitment. Even though the Jews were taken to forced labor camps. Now what is the forced labor camp? The Hungarian Nazis, with the support of the Germans, they went almost house to house. I took the men and some of the able-bodied women to do them literally forced labor. Whatever is needed to be done, so-called supporting the Hungarian military. They got maybe 1 meal a day. The housing was awful. Many people who were taken there never came home. My father was able to come home every now and then. And that was really a miracle. How we turned to 1944, Hitler decided it is time then a German Nazi fascist government occupy Hungary. And here is a picture. On March 19th of 1944, the Nazis came in. The newspapers and the loudspeakers all over in the country were saying, the Germans are coming and Hungarians must welcome them with open arms. This is the day when they came to the city of Budapest. Budapest on the west side, which is the east side of the river Danube, has a beautiful boulevard called the Ring Road. It is very beautiful today. 2 years ago, I was walking there with my grandchildren. I have seen it with my naked eye because my grandfather took me out to that boulevard, which was only 3 blocks away from the house that we moved in 1940. And I have seen the fascist Nazi government's representative, the military, the SS, the Gestapo, and regular military personnel were marching in goose steps, in black boots. All have guns. And guess what? Look at it. Every one of them was wearing an armband, which is swastika on there. Hate and hate, that was it represented. After being on the boulevard for a few minutes, my grandfather said, they're taking you home. And how we were walking home, he said to me, and I paraphrase, our life was due to a permanently change. I really didn't understand what it meant. But that picture I never forgot. And that was a long time ago. Let's please history, 1944. And let's go to the next slide. 21st century. August 11 of 2017. I go home from work. Turn the television on, and listen to the news. And holy behold, I am seeing a bunch of talks of white supremacists were marching in Charlottesville, Virginia. And look at it. They are carrying the Nazi flag. Hatred, anti-Semitism. Unbelievable. Not only that, but they were also carrying a flag representing the South many, many years before, the Confederate flags. Just as a note, I went to college in East Tennessee. I traveled the South extensively. Everybody should learn American history to know that America has some dark years behind. We overcome a great deal. But we cannot forget, in that march, there's one young lady was killed. Hundreds of them ended up in hospitals and had a hard time to trying to recover. The next slide, we just show you how these white supremacist thugs were marching there. And guess what? They were saying the same slogan what I had heard of telling you. That is the truth. The Jews are useless. They are bloodsuckers. Just to remind you, there are over 15 major white supremacist groups existing in this country. And guess what? They hate the Jews, they hate the blacks, they hate the Muslims, they hate Asian Americans. It seems to me they abide by simple principles of purification of belief. To be careful. You should know who's your neighbor. And let's even get closer. And let's look at the next one. January 6th. I couldn't believe when I was watching television, I see a hoodlum, a truck, running around in a sweatshirt. It is written on there, Camp Auschwitz. You may not be able to read this, but it says, work makes you free. There was a German slogan which said, Auschwitz must cry. And the Jews were told that in a concentration camp. If you work hard, then you will be free. The only one they don't think they will be free. On January 6th, in that lecture, Camp Auschwitz, when I was walking the cobblestones in that camp, in Birkenau, which is a sister city, I couldn't stop crying. But I knew that over 1.2 million Jews were killed, slaughtered, and burned to ashes. The other one is only political slides I have. These thugs were yelling, "Hang the vice president!" My thanks. He was there to perform his constitutional duty, which the current Vice President Kamala Harris just did a week ago, to verifying the election, which was held back in last November. This is the type of thing what white supremacists are stands for. Now let's go back to 1944. Shortly after the fascist government of Germany occupied Hungary, Hitler dispatched this guy, Adolf Eichmann. He had one purpose in Hungary, to expedite the deportation of Hungarian Jews to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Hungary had about 8.5 million population, and about 650,000 of them were Jews. That man created an assembly line process to deport about 550,000 Hungarian Jews to their death. Because anybody who got to Auschwitz-Birkenau, the likelihood didn't make it out of it. This man also was very proud to say that my hand was in of killing over 5 million people. He was eventually captured after the war in Argentina, taken to Israel, sentenced to death, and that's the only one person who was executed in the land of Israel. So let's look at the next slide. This is the same map I showed it to you, map of Europe. Ignore the colors and the sizes of these dots, but every one of them were a concentration camp in Europe. Some of them were death camps. You can see over here, Auschwitz-Birkenau, which is in Poland, Ljubljana, Treblinka, and many others. There is Mauthausen, which is the south part of Austria, and in Germany, Bergen-Belsen, Buchenwald, and Dachau. They are the major death camps. There are thousands of them. In Germany, in almost every village, and ways and means to round up the Jews and kill them. Let's go to the next slide. It's very personal. This is a picture of my mother and my father in 1940. In a village where my mother was born, called Budapest, is about 6-7 miles south on the east side of the river Danube, Budapest, tiny little village. The significance of the village is major. It saved lives. Why? Because in that village, practically everybody spoke a very distinct German dialect called Schwab. Schwabi are actually located in the southwest corner of Germany. It was so distinct dialect, and every German had difficulty of understanding. Talk about it a little later. And on the right picture, the far right, this German is my father. Very easily recognized. When the Germans took the Jews in the concentration camps, they practically stripped them everything what they had, including their clothing. Give them a striped uniform and put them to work or kill them. They just have arrived to a camp, but they still wearing civilian clothing. I couldn't identify where this was. The next slide is also very dear to me. This cattle car, what you see here, is not just any ordinary cattle car. This is currently in display in Birkenau. It's a real thing. I walked up to it and I touched it. And I was trembling because I knew in that cattle car, hundreds of Jews were shipped to their death. Now you can read it. Practically every German business Jews are slave laborer. And cattle cars like that, they're shipping the Jews from all over in Europe to their death. This is the only 3 pictures I show you about the atrocities. The Jews were rounded up in the various countries. They processed them, take them to a railroad station, and ship them. These pictures were actually related to the Hungarian Jews. They shoved them into cattle cars, and sometimes it took 3-4 days to arrive at destination. There was no facilities, there was no food, there was no water, and many of the people are in the train, if you can call it that. They're dead. When they arrived, then they work from the cattle cars and went through a selection process. here is a picture. Actually, there were three groups. As soon as these people got out from the train, German doctors and officers were going through a selection process. Able-bodied people who were designated to have been sent to an infirmary or a makeshift hospital, so then the German doctors could perform experiments. Those first things, they just wanted to see how the people to react to it. And we got to do it. Introduces the I happen to know a wonderful lady who just turned 100 very recently, who survived, Joseph Mengele, who was the head honcho of this experiment. The remaining people selected into two groups, able-bodied and taken away immediately, strip them, give them a striped uniform. And when you walk through the concentration camps, you can see Jews or non-Jews. People who were handicapped, or the elderly, or children, or the Nazis didn't think that they can do hard labor, they were put in another group. They were taken away, and holy behold, within 8 hours, they were ashes. When I was in Majdanek, there is a memorial. It's a dome, and when you walk up to it, underneath the dome, what you see is still in ashes. So anybody try to tell you that the Holocaust is a hoax, they live in La La Land. They don't know reality. Now let's go back to Hungary. The next slide shows you that the Hungarian government issued a law, April 5th of 1944, and every Jew in the country must wear a yellow star on the left-hand side of the outer garment. I did wear it. The children in the orphanage were told must wear the yellow star. We never allowed to leave the building at any circumstances. There were strict rules. Also, we were told that we must keep silent. So the conditions in Hungary even get worse. The next slide show you a Swedish gentleman called Roald Wallenberg. The Swedish government dispatched this gentleman, who was actually part of the aristocracy, to protect Swedish property. And when he arrived in July 1944, he realized what the Nazis doing, and he said, I'm going to save as many Jews as possible. He created safe houses and told the Hungarian and the German Nazis, you are not allowed to enter these buildings. See, Hungary had a major Nazi party called the Arrow Cross Party, and they were the major instigators of killing the Jews. He worked with some ambassadors who were sympathetic to his cause to protect Jews, issuing documents, to trying to get them out of the country or trying to protect them. This man almost single-handedly saved over 80,000 Hungarian Jews from their death. After the fast forward, when the war ended in July of 1945, he was called into a meeting with the Soviets. You know, there used to be a Soviet Union. And as soon as she arrived, she was captured by the Soviets, accused of CIA spy. and we never have heard about him afterward. More likely died sometimes in the Gulag. Practically every major city in Europe, there's a memorial, some means or other, about Wallenberg. The next slide only shows you a larger picture in the city of Budapest in the summer of 1944. You can see the building labeled as Jewish, the train station, how people were rounded up. This particular picture is a very well-known picture because there are a couple of book covers. The next slide is showing you the Budapest ghetto. How we were moving toward end of August of 1944, the Hungarian government issued a law that every Jew of the city of Budapest must move into this territory. 74 acres, tiny. There are two red circles. The red circle with the plus sign is the building my parents moved in 1940. Because of the location, we were safer than if we would have away by a couple of blocks. This is the school I went to. All the streets, what you see here, located by about 7-foot stone walls. There were only 4 gates. The gates were guarded by Hungarian and German Nazis. Nobody get in, nobody get out. We children had strict rules. We got 1 meal a day, whatever it was, you ate it. The food came from the Jewish agency, which was located about 7 blocks from the building I showed it to you. The kindergarten had a kitchen. Sometimes the ladies cooked some food. We were housed where? Not in the empty space in the building, but in the cellar. Actually, proper description is a dungeon. That clear flooring, nothing flat. We had 2 windows for ventilation, 1 light bulb. We had city electricity, so if we had electricity, we had light. Conditions were unbearable. Thanks God for the kindergarten and the nursery school, we had cots and blankets, so we didn't have to lay down on a wet clay flooring. But we were always cold, practically freezing. But the most important thing, the people who were looking after us told us, you must not stop. I can imagine little kids not to stop. But you know what? We follow the rules. When the days were nice, then in small groups we were taken to the courtyard to play, but under strict supervision. So the Budapest ghetto was created, and there, this area, there were over 80,000 Jews were crammed in. All the non-Jews were asked to move out. Nobody got any compensation for anything. The brutality, physical and verbal abuse, was a regular activity of the Hungarian and German Nazis. So I will tell you a few stories about the ghetto. The first one is related to me directly. It could have been end of September of 1944. It's a beautiful day, and we were allowed to go in small groups to play. How we were running around just like kids. I tripped, I hit my head, and it started to bleed very badly. My mother started panic. Said, oh my God, what I'm going to do? Of course, there was no way of finding a doctor or anything like that. The other adults, first aid trying to patch up my head. Now my kindergarten teacher rose to my mother, Clara, I take care of it. And immediately took my outer garment, removed the yellow star, and looked at me and said, Endre, you keep your mouth shut, you look down, you hold my hand hard, and you walk with me as fast as we can walk. Only behold, we left the building, and I was in a state of panic. We were told never leave the building and must wear the yellow star. We violated both rules. And we were dashing very close to the leader's gate. It was about just a few blocks. When we got there, the Hungarian Nazi was yelling at her, show me your ID. So she does. And the Nazi guard said, why are you here? Looking at the ID. You are not a Jew. The law states that every non-Jew must move out. And she was just like a kindergarten teacher, very calmly explained. Can't you see my son's head is bleeding? I'm taking him to the hospital. I lost my husband a few years back. I had no place to move, so I stayed in my one-room apartment. And eventually the God let us out. The hospital was about 6-7 blocks from the gate. We walked there, the doctor patched up my head, came back, and the guard outside almost had the same set of questions, but let us in. And when we got back to the building, of course, everybody was happy and thrilled. The moral of the story is significant. Here was a lady who was never married, was a spinster. Went to church every time we could tell. It was very religious. And thirdly, she was willing to sacrifice her life to protect this Jewish boy who is talking to you today. There were many young Jews who made sacrifices. My grandfather took me out to the ring road, was hiding over 5 months, from building to building or apartment to apartment. And people were hiding him. And my brother-in-law was hiding for 7 months. Not enough of them who were able to protect the Jewish population. The Hungarian Nazis were coming into the building. Rounded upon the others, they went from apartment to apartment. Then when they were bleeding, they took them to the courtyard, took them to the wall. They had guns. I did see with my naked eye on my mother and other family members who were living at that time with us, about a dozen of them. My kindergarten teacher rose, just standing in the wall, hands up like that. Because I slipped up from the dungeon area to see what's happening. It was awful. Physical and verbal abuse. They had guns, but thank God they didn't do it. That was a regular activity. How we were moving into the month of October, early part of November, these thugs were coming in, but one particular day they came early in the morning, rounded up every others, and took them away to a collection place. And of course, everybody knew what's going to happen. They would be processed, taken to a railroad station, and shipped to a death camp. Just as a note, we did have a radio, but the wavelengths were jammed by the Nazis, so you couldn't hear any news. Music was okay, but news, no. Aeroplanes were flying all over, bombardment. All the buildings, what you have showed it to you, were hit 4 times. The top floor was almost completely destroyed. But on that particular day, they took the people away, and they were standing in line. And only behold, my grandmother from the village where my mother was born, and spoke the dialect Schwab, had noticed an SS guard, and she just dashed up and started to speak that very special dialect. And the SS guard was just stunned. And he says, "What are you doing here? You are not a Jew. Anybody who speaks that language cannot be a Jew. It's impossible." And my grandmother, who owned the general store, had dealt with people all the time, very calmly said, "That from the village, my sisters and my cousins, we came out. Hopefully the city of Budapest will provide a safer place than where we live." And they carried a conversation. And as God said, "Go home. You don't belong here. Take your family." Everybody who was taken away from the building came back. Obviously, my grandmother didn't have cousins or sisters there. They were all the people who were living in the building. And we saved them. But take your opportunity and take advantage of it when it come up. The war was keep going on. But how did we reach in December of 1944? Things sort of slowed down. And we knew that a war has to come to an end. The rumors flying, which we were able to figure out, I mean the others, not the kids. The Soviets were coming from the west, from the east toward west, and the Allied forces were coming from the west to east to encircle the Nazis and hopefully end of the war. But just before Christmas time, the Nazis came in, rounded up the people. Significant. They came in a late afternoon. And you know, when in December it gets dark very fast. They took the local action place, which existed in Budapest, by hundreds of them. And then they were standing in line, realizing what's going to happen. But for J-Lock, the loudspeaker came and said, "We cannot trust anybody anymore. Who's not trusted, go home, get to tomorrow." And everybody who was taken away from the building came back. Of course, tomorrow came, but these thugs never came back. I show you two slides. One is a makeshift gate, and you can see ghetto, the guard. And the next slide show you the 7-foot stone wall. This particular wall was discovered in 1962, urban renewal in the city of Budapest, and tore down. But these were the walls which barricaded the wall of the streets in the ghetto, so you couldn't get in or out. On January 17th of 1945, two husky military persons shows up in our building. They didn't look like the Nazis or the Hungarians, the Soviets. Red Army personnel. With body language, they were telling that the Budapest ghetto is liberated. Actually, Hungary was liberated by the Soviets by end of February of 1945. So my grandmother from the village said, I will go back to see if my home and my business is still existing in the village. So she walked back about 7 miles, and when she arrived, one of her neighbors was a good friend, a farmer's wife and not Jewish, and noticed her. So she just stopped, hugged her, kissed her, and said, "Welcome home. You survived the horrors." Let's go to the next slide. And in the conversation, told a terrifying story. My grandmother owned that white dog. It was a stray dog. My cousin in the dark outfit and her laughed his me. He played with the dog all the time before the war. Just like any kid would play. We loved that dog. I never forget the name of the dog. I'm using the dog's name in my user ID. A friend neighbor was telling the story of what happened. The dog came around all the time looking for food and light. Well, my grandmother was staying with us in the city, in the ghetto. The friendly neighbor said, I fed the dog every time when I did see the dog. But the war was practically over. The other neighbor of my grandmother was a Hungarian Nazi sympathizer. And noticed the dog. And when he did, he went back, got his gun, came out, and guess what? Killed the dog. So the friend who had seen it, so what did you do that for? And I only can paraphrase what my grandmother said. He said, it belongs to a Jew. It must die. This is what hatred, anti-Semitism. Unbelievable. Then my grandmother brought back and took my cousin Tom and myself to the village to go to school. The schoolhouse was bombed. So our classrooms were in the basement of a Catholic church. My teachers were nuns and priests. There were some secular people who were also working. And the next slide will show you my second grade picture. Look at this little guy. I'm not much bigger than that. From the kids were able to get along. We were going back to them, go to the river building, and join this way. And when we would come, everybody knew I am a Jew. There were maybe about a dozen kids who were Jewish. Came back to the village. They never had any problems with kids. It is the adults who are corrupting everything else, not the kids. These conditions sort of improved, but the Hungarian government came and go. They couldn't establish any stable institution. There were dozens of parties. I mean, it was really ridiculous. I just learned those things from history. My mother came and visited in a village, and in June of 1945, she said, Andy, I'll take you home. Our building was rebuilt, and we were able to move back to our apartment. In the meanwhile, my mother was trying to rebuild a little bit of the business, but my father had, which is with my grandfather, to make a living. Came and got me. And then took me home. She said, Andy, I need to teach you for 3 things. How to shop, how to cook, and how to clean. I have to go to work. I cannot do all these things. I had a shopping list, and I just will tell you very briefly. Things written. When you go to the supermarket and you need eggs, you pick up a dozen, maybe 18. On that list was 1 egg. On the list, okay, a quart of milk. Everything was practically designated how much I need to buy. cleaning, the major endeavor. We needed hot water. I had to go to the laundry place to get the wood, take it up to the top floor, chop it up, and build a fire in a wood stove to have hot water for either for cooking or cleaning. And for cleaning, you get down in the knees, the bread, and clean the floor. That was a convenience, and I did it and not my mother. So the conditions were very, very bad. And other quick illustration about it. When you go home, you can open a refrigerator and take out a bottle of water, or juice, or soda, and get refreshed. For us, we had what we call ice box, 2 words. Ice box. It's a 4-leg, 2-compartment. One was for the ice, one was for the food. Every day, a vendor came in to the courtyard, said, ice. I went down there and I bought a piece of ice. I had to chop it up, put it into the compartment. It may have lasted 1 day. Not 24 hours, just 1 day. These are the things which a 7.5 years, 8-year-old boy had to learn. Washing clothes was by hand. I just hot water and soap and scrubbed it. And in cold water, rinsed it. You hang it up on stone. It was in the attic. I do love to cook. So sometimes my wife says, why don't you cook dinner? No big deal. But this was the environment. But I never knew what happened with my dad. And then we went to July of 1945. The same rose that saved my life was screaming top of her lungs my mother's name. Claro, Claro, Claro. She dashed to the corridor to the top floor. And when we got there, she said, your husband Steve is home. I moved from the top floor to the ground floor faster than anyone that ever could move. Like speed of light. I hugged him in the kitchen, man. And then I took 3 steps back, and I looked at him with tears coming down on my face. I did not recognize my own father. He may have weighed just 70 pounds. Describe to you how much 70 pounds is? I am 131 pounds. I measure myself every day according to my cardiologist. To think about somebody who is 60 pounds lighter than I. Skin and bone. It took my mother over a year to nourish him back to some real life, some existence. During that 1 year, in our 2-room apartment, he was sometimes walking up and down the middle of the night and screaming and crying. And my mother said, Andy, ignore Dad. He was living the horror. He went through in a death camp called Auschwitz, which is located in the southern part of Austria. And if you Google it, you will be shocked what that camp looked like. The conditions in Hungary were not very good. Unfortunately, the Socialist Party came to power probably about 1949, and by late 1950, the Communist Party was elected to run the government, and that was Soviet communism. Practically all that type of a philosophy of communism came into the country. Practically the first thing they did, confiscated all private property. So whatever my parents were rebuilt after the war is gone. They had to vote for the government. And they didn't make enough money to really exist. For the devastating times. I went to high school 1951 to 1955. And when I was a senior, I applied to go to university. And eventually I got a letter from the government, because everything was run by the government. The Department of Education of Hungary. Then I'm rejected. The rejection was undesirable element to society. Now what the heck that means? Rule number one. The next one here. This is the original birth certificate. When I got circle, my name, my sex, and the abbreviation of my religion. Everybody knew I'm a Jew. Jews were not accepted to the university unless if you had very strong connections. So go to the next slide and you can see the English translation. In the red box, my name, sex, and religion. Number two, my father was accused of being a capitalist, even though he didn't own a business anymore. But he did at one point. The communism makes every effort to push people down to the lowest common denominator, to trying to practically cover them, not only by food, but from life. That's communism. What we doing with that right now? The whole environment will come back. And number two, we were very poor. So there was no way my parents could possibly find some connection by bribing for me to go to university. So I went to a trade school. If I wanted to get married and have children, I need to learn some profession. I wanted to be a tool and die maker. I returned to the summer of 1956. The conditions in Hungary sort of loosened up because the Soviets realized that too much pressure put on the Hungarians. And that provided the opportunity for the Hungarian nation, the people of Hungary, to organize themselves and hopefully shake Soviet communism out of the system. And they organized the march, which took place in October 23rd of 1956. I was 1 week short of the age 20. I attended, not only sympathized, but I was willing to participate in any shape or form. There were speeches, and after the speeches, the so-called leaders said, we marched to the radio station and read a proclamation what the Hungarians want, replacing Soviet communism. And I marched in the narrow streets. I was in the front line. We arrived to the building where the radio station was. Just as you know, the whole country had 2 radio stations. Just think about it. Every town in the United States has one. The neighbors wanted to enter. The 2 guards who had guns didn't let anybody in. And they used the guns to shoot in bullets in the air to disperse the crowd. Nobody left. That started the Hungarian Revolution, which lasted 8 days. On my birthday, my 20th birthday, I could truly walk out on the street and breathe free air. The first time in my life. In about 2 weeks in November, the Soviets came back with armored vehicles, tanks, thousands of troops, destroyed everything what the revolution achieved. And the next slide will show you two pictures. The victory, October 21st, November 1, and the defeat by the Soviets. I just wanted to show something related to it. On November 23rd, 1956, in the morning when I get up, I told my parents, I have no future in this country. All my friends already escaped. I said, it's time to go. I give them kisses to say goodbye. And I left with an overcoat. I have a coat like that, which I left hungry. My grandmother gave me her wedding band. It was pure gold, 24-karat gold. And he said, Endre, just in case, you can sell it. They will get food. That wedding band is in a jewelry box. And I escaped. That's a different story. From Maine to leave Budapest to go to Vienna took a little over 3 weeks. Walking, so-called hitchhiking with horse and buggy, trying to catch a train for one station, not to be caught. But when I arrived to Vienna, eventually was able to get to the American embassy. And I pleaded my case to the Hungarian refugees. The next slide will show you the ship I came across the ocean. On a designated day just before Christmas of 1956, over 3,000 Hungarian refugees were taken to this transport ship called the Marine Corps. This ship participated in the Second World War as well as the Korean War. It took us 18 days to came across. It is this little guy. I wasn't seasick, so I was able to get to the top deck many times and was able to volunteer to do whatever the ship personnel needed, like cleaning the toilets, the bathrooms, working in the kitchen, peeling potatoes. So we were treated royally, and the food was fantastic. The last day of the voyage, I'm in a top deck, and all behold, in a distance, I see something very special. I recognize it from my history book. To the next slide, please. This is the most beautiful woman I ever have seen. Show that to my wife too. It's unbelievable. Everybody can go and live. And there's a picture. There is a plaque. And there's a poem on the plaque. The poem is written by this lady, Emma Lazarus, and it describes what the United States stands for. Even though people not necessarily believe it. And he says, "Beginning, I was your fool, your horrid masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore shall give the homeless the toughest toast to me. I lift my hand beside the golden door." That poem will describe the country we live in, which is the greatest country in the world, and don't ever forget it. With all our troubles, and the Yiddish word says Taurus, we still in the bad, because living is the people of the country. So cherish every moment of it. You can badmouth it in the right way. I count every hour with grace and understanding what this country gave me. So the next slide will tell you what's going on today. I should have updated, which is in the top part, but it shows you that anti-Semitism is increasing in leaps and bounds. And the statistics only show you from 1940 to 1921. There was a 34% increase in that 1 year of anti-Semitic incidents in this country. And nowadays, it's over 400%. Today, the hatred of Jews is higher than ever in any place in the world. Just as a note, there is no way of fighting against hate. It is our responsibility to fight it. And if you don't, we will succeed. And don't forget what I told you about the white supremacist groups. Like the oath keepers, the Proud Boys, and similar of them. They are good for nothing. And when you are talking about social media, please be careful what you read, because 90+% of it are garbage. It's personal opinions. You have one, I have one. So I tell to the kids, verify what you read before you believe. It's a disgrace how technology is corrupted. It has its place. I use it all the time. Particularly, I don't have to use a dictionary anymore. I just Google the word, figure it out. It's a wonderful thing. I used to design computers for 25 years, so I know what the power it has. I don't use it. I had it, but I don't use it. Here's a very significant quotation for a distinguished congressman from the state of Georgia, passed away a few years ago. And he will tell you about the freedom, what we have, particularly the freedom of speech, which practically everybody abuses. It says, I believe in the freedom of speech, but I also believe that we have an obligation to condemn speech that is racist, bigoted, anti-Semitic, or hateful. The author is John Roberts Lewis, a distinguished congressman for over 30 years, who fought for equality for all. The next few slides just show you about family, and go to the next slide. Before I talk about the other ones, look at the 3 pictures on the right. The lady sitting here over the conflict of the community. A colored woman, much younger than I was, said, I want to do a triathlon. And I said, what is a triathlon? And she described it to me. She was 2 small children. And she said, I did that last year. I said, look, I'm 75. Please, how can I do anything like that? You can do it. So I broke down, I paid my fee over $100. And I made a commitment that I did do it. I trained for 4 months, 5, 6 days a week, except on my Sabbath. My wife was ready to divorce me. So I entered the first Wednesday of July of each year. There's a triathlon in the quasi amusement park. And the event was held there. And Mary and I, we attended there together. With the fact that we do it together. There were over 400 participants. The youngest one was 13. It turns out I was the oldest one. So when we were going to the water, I was in the last group. And when my turn was going in, the only thing I said, please God, as we get through the first part of the race. Here I am coming down the road. Get to my bike, and I said, God, please help me. Get to the second one. Here I am. I said, I have it made. I can walk the 5 kilometers, which is 3.1 miles. But I said, no. Walking is a crap. I need to do the best I can. So I did. And here I am, coming to the finish line. Because I was part in the last group of swimmers, I got 10 minutes off. So I did the course under 2 hours and 10 minutes. Remember, I was 75 years young. The point of this, when I tell to the students, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to do, if you put your mind to it, and you don't think, what do it? That word no, should be negative, should be also avoided in your vocabulary. Just try. When you try, you succeed. Here's the picture when I played soccer in Hungary. Some of the other soccer players, my college graduation, and I played soccer in a varsity team in college. The next slide, very quickly. This picture was taken in Budapest with my second cousin. This is my wife. This is my second cousin. That's her daughter and her son and wife. That's my wife. This picture was taken in Budapest in 2017. A very dear friend who came to the United States, met her husband in Israel, who was from New Haven. And they came and practiced medicine for about 7 or 8 years, and then they went back. That was this picture taken in Tel Aviv. And here, my wife and I, we were walking in a shopping area in Jerusalem called the Yehuda Street. And lo and behold, I see a lady, and I run up to her and I said, are you so-and-so? She said, yes. We haven't seen each other for 30 years. They used to be our neighbors, practically our neighbors, in Binghamton, New York. Next slide. This is a family picture, was taken about 9 years ago. That little guy with the glasses is my grandson's bar mitzvah. He was 13. Jewish tradition, at age 13, Jewish boys brought into the Jewish religion fully. They are not adults. They just brought into the Jewish religion. Okay. Next one is my wife. Behind my wife is our daughter Andrea. Then to the right is her husband Greg and her 3 kids. That little guy here is that little guy here. I just was visiting this past Sabbath with them, and I look like a midget next time. And here is my son, his wife, and a daughter. They have 2 kids. You can see over here, and I participated running 5Ks on a regular basis for many years until I had a heart attack 6.5 years ago. I am in a gym anyway, 4 or 5 times a week. physical fitness gives you smartness. And here is my wife. We are walking in the beaches of Milford on a beautiful summer afternoon. The next slide. I received this certificate from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum for the reasons what I do, give talks, and trying to provide some information, a little bit, what happened during Second World War, and what happened afterwards, particularly in Iron Curtain countries. The last couple of notes, I was able to bring my parents to the United States after when I became citizen, because then it was blood relative. And we were able to celebrate together with my mother, my father's mother, my mother, my father, and my little sister. My little sister is 12 years younger than I am. See, I was born in 36, and she was born after the war in 1928. So we had that. And I put one note over here to tell you that during Second World War, the US military seeked out Jews who escaped Germany into the United States. They introduced them intelligence. They taught them how to deal with secrets, how to deal with people, and teach them how to interrogate the German military. These groups of people were called the Richie Boys. Go and Google it. The last one just died very recently, I think it was 102 or 103. These boys went into the theater of Second World War and interrogated hundreds of German officers and figured out what the Germans are up to and fed that information back to the US military to be able to expedite the winning of the war. So there was a major contingency of Jews who provided victory for Eisenhower. I can tell you all kinds of stories. There was a German gentleman, Uncle Wimpel, from England, who went to Czechoslovakia and organized a group of people to save 864 Jewish kids from Czechoslovakia. When he was celebrated his 100th year's birthday, a large theater was rented, celebration started, and in the middle of it, the master of ceremony said to the audience, please stand up if you were saved by Uncle Milton. Guess what? Everybody in the theater stood up. He only saved 864 people. I'm good. There were over 3,000 people there. But those people whom he saved got married, had children. And the children grown up and get married, had children. So that was against what Hitler wanted to do. Jewish people will survive forever. There are three reasons. Number one, Jews have a home country. What do you mean home? If you want to go there, the open arm to take it. Number two, it has a tradition which we practice and learn from it. And number three, we remember there is a Hebrew word called Easter. We in the synagogue say that special prayer 4 times a year. And those reasons, the Jewish people will survive no matter what. Thank you very much for listening. No, no,